All right, so Alex is up. I kind of replied to him even 6 days ago because it's funny when we close down the Hump Day Hangouts and then like an hour later we get more questions. I feel obligated to answer them because it's like otherwise you got to wait. That person's got to wait 7 days. So don't get in the habit of posting on the the day of the Hangout after the Hangout's over because I'm not always going to be able to answer them. Anyways, that said, Alex had a pretty good question, guys. So I'm going to kind of run through this. He says, hey, guys, I have a branded lead gen WordPress property. He's calling it XYZ company for this example. I have made the mistake to not use a calling center, and the confusion happening 8 to 10 times is insane. The contractor has an answering service as well, which, of course, only says their own name when the phone rings. The caller might ask 3 to 4 times, is this XYZ company? And they reply, no, you made a mistake. We are ABC. The problem is even if I solve the problem with the calling center, my client, the contractor, still has a problem with the confusion that occurs when they arrive at the job site and they see something different than the website. Or even when he calls back, mentions his company, and then the question arises, why is it different, etc. Playing the game that he is indeed XYZ company while he owns another big company and lying to his clients is not viable. Yeah, you never, ever, ever recommend that you mislead anybody or that your client or your service provider, in this case, misleads anybody. Why would you encourage? You don't encourage, and that's what he's saying. It's not viable. So that's not what Alex is doing. But I'm telling everybody else, don't ever do that, right? You don't ever want to try to mislead people or have your or ask anybody to mislead people, which would be your contractor in this case. Would you recommend to use their name inside the website as partners? Just give a hint to who is going to be on the phone when the contractor calls back, and of course, to know who is going to come to the job. And so you can see I replied, and never attempt to mislead the caller or ask the call center or contractor to mislead. What you can do is have your call center, if you have one, answer with ABC, formerly XYZ. So in other words, you can say, or another version of that is XYZ is under new management by ABC. Or you could say, thank you for calling XYZ. Thank you for calling ABC, which would be the company, the actual contractor that's going to go to the job, and say part of the XYZ marketing group or something like that. Does that make sense? Here's the thing, guys. When I first got started in this business, that is exactly the issue that I ran into. Was I would have my generic branded websites and in Google Maps listings at the time, because I would do both. And for example, I would always just use the city name plus tree service. So let's just use Culpeper Tree Service as an example. The listing would show and the website would show Culpeper Tree Service, but then whatever the company's name was that would actually go show up at the, I would send them the lead information, but they would go show up at the house because I never sent the calls directly to the contractor. I would have them go to a call center. Like I learned that really early on. And so I always had a call center set up, but the call center would answer like Culpeper Tree Service, how may I help you? They would take the lead information and send it out to the contractor. The tree service contractor would then show up at the job, but their truck and their lettering and their shirts, everything would have completely different branding. And that would cause confusion. And I remember contractors calling me and asking me, well, what do I do? And at the time, I didn't really have a good answer. But I learned over time, kind of rather quickly, that the best thing to do is just either rebrand the site essentially for them, which you can do if you have a decent relationship with the contractor. And with the Google My Business profile or a Maps listing, what you can do is if you're worried about actually rebranding or renaming it, which I wouldn't be if you have a good relationship, but it can cause a bit of a pain in the ass if you decide that you have to replace the contractor with somebody else. But what you can do is actually change the logo image to the contractor's logo and the profile, like the main banner, the main profile, not just the profile image, but the like the header banner, which could also be the image on the GMB website if you're just using GMB assets. And then on the website itself, I would always rebrand the website for the contractor so that I wouldn't have to update my NAP essentially, but I would still have the contractor's information on there. But with the call center, what I would do is I would end up have the call center say, this is Joe's Tree Service, formerly Culpeper Tree Service, or part of the Culpeper Tree Service marketing group, or something like that, right? So that it would be very clear to the caller right off the bat. If the caller would say, well, oh, I thought I was calling Culpeper Tree Service. Oh, yeah, that I would tell the contractor when they'd say, well, I thought I'd call Culpeper Tree Service. I would tell the contractor to tell them, hey, it's a marketing website that we use for generating leads, and it hadn't been rebranded to our name yet. And that way you're not misleading anybody. They're telling the truth. And so again, if you're using a call center, in this case, he says that he should be, which I totally agree. I've said that many, many times, guys. Your best bet is to use a call center, period. It gives you a lot more control. It's more of an exclusive service that way. You know, there's a lot of benefits to using a call center. But that's what I do. So, for example, I just had to fire a handyman for some assets that I had built for him. But that's what, you know, we would say, thank you for calling Home Pros or whatever. Now under new management by, and then we'd mentioned the new the new handyman's name, excuse me. And so it was very clear to the caller that what they called online was still the correct from the number that they called online. They went online, did a search, they found a company, they called that company, and now that company is either under new management or part of a marketing group or something like that. Does that make sense? It's a very simple way to make it clear to the caller that they are indeed getting their phone is being answered by the person that's going to come out and provide them with an estimate or service, you know, provide them with the service. Does that make sense? So that's essentially what I told him, is just to do that. If you have a longer term relationship with a particular contractor that is proven, or a service provider, doesn't have to be a contractor, right? But has proven to be a good partnership, because that's the way I look at these when I deal with service providers, then I don't mind even setting up new assets under that brand. I still control them. I don't give them access to it, but I don't mind setting them up under their brand. It's going to be my phone numbers, my web assets, everything, so that in the event that it goes south, then I can always go in and update all that stuff. So I don't mind actually going in and setting them up branded for the contractor right off the bat, as long as I've already established a good relationship. You guys, it's critically important, guys, that to deal with service providers when you're selling leads that you can build a longer term relationship with, because you're going to have a much better business. It's going to be more stable, and you're going to have a much better time just managing it, right? It'll be easier to manage. So that's why I recommend, I've said that over and over and over again. I even said it in the training. If you're starting out, you're going to have to establish that relationship first. And this is the workaround until you have established that right relationship. Once you have established that relationship, then don't be afraid to rebrand for that particular service provider. It just makes everything easier for you to manage going forward, as well as, you know, it will make your service provider happier too, because it'll be their name out there on the web until and unless they do something stupid and you have to go rebrand it again. But since you maintain control of the assets, that shouldn't be an issue, right? It's not something you want to do, by the way, is switch service providers often, guys. It's a pain in the ass. Don't do that, because it only makes it harder on you. So that's why I said it's important to try to find. Now, initially, like I said, you might have to sift through, you know, several pieces of garbage to find a good one, and that happens. Like I just mentioned, I had to fire a handyman that I built some assets for because he turned out to be a piece of garbage, literally. Okay, but it happens. It happens from time to time, and that's why I had set up his original handyman service provider maps listing under his name, but all the other ones that I had set up in, you know, in the adjacent areas were all branded under a generic brand name, and it was for a reason, because I said to him, I'm not going to brand these for you until we've established a good relationship. And guess what? Within 6 weeks, I realized that he was a piece of shit, and so since I set up his original branded account and didn't give him access to it, I literally shut his branded account down. It's gone. Like it's gone. You can't even pull it up in Maps anymore. But I kept all the generic ones that I had set up, and they were all still under the generic name because he hadn't proven himself to me yet, which was great for me because I didn't have to go in and try to rebrand them again within 6 weeks. Does that make sense? So again, guys, there are ways to deal with this, and that's a great way, and that's part of the reason why I prefer using a call center. There's just a number of benefits for using a call center, guys. All right. It was a good question, though, Alex.